Thank you, Sabot, and good morning. Yeah, that was a lot of fun, driving the Trabant, as a matter of fact. I enjoyed that. And this time, do I get a chance to drive a Trabant, I hope? So, this morning, what to talk about? Thank you, it's great to be here. I just arrived yesterday, and this is my second visit to Hungary. It seems I've been here many times, actually. I talk with Szabolcs occasionally, and I enjoyed my time last time so much. I've enjoyed the food, the cars, and also getting to know so many of you. So I will be with you, as she explained, the moderator explained, this morning and this afternoon. So I'd invite you to think about any questions or thoughts, not just questions, but challenges that you may have. We have a few minutes to do some Q&A, I think, this morning, but also I'll see you throughout the day, and then this afternoon we can discuss some more as well. But what I prepared to talk about, to think about together, is what we call understanding lean transformation. I think we're at a point in time when we need to understand more deeply what this change is, and then how we can transform ourselves from the way things are today to the way they could be in a better future. So I use this word transformation. It's a kind of a big English word. And it has a basic meaning, and it has the meaning that we think of as we think of where we are and where we would like to be in our companies. Essentially, transformation just means to change in condition. So everything we do in the factory, if I'm taking some plastic and I'm molding it, I'm transforming it. If I take two pieces of plastic, put some electronics inside, put them together, then I'm transforming it. Basic meaning of the word, if you look in the English dictionary, we think of converting, often electricity, to increase or decrease voltage. We have a transformer. We can buy a transformer that will change electricity. In physics, it means really to change to a different form of energy. And I think in our companies as well, we're thinking about changing to a different form of energy, to the inertia of the way we used to do things, from the way we have traditionally done things that are not as successful as we would like, to a new way, so that we're transforming our energy to be more effective and efficient at the enterprise level. So to define the word from a standpoint of an enterprise, our companies, and from lean, I think any enterprise transformation, and we all work in some sort of company, whether it's a for-profit company or in healthcare and hospitals or for the government. Enterprise transformation is the process of any organization shifting its business model to a desired future state. Here's the way things are today. Here's the way we would like them to be in the future. A lean transformation requires learning a new way of thinking and a new way of acting. So, unfortunately, we cannot simply buy a transformer and put in place. Unfortunately, there's more to it than that. So let's explore what that means a little bit. Learning a new way of thinking, a new way of acting. So we've been at this now for a while, globally, and we know that lean will work anywhere, geographically, in any country. As Szabolcs mentioned, I began learning about this in Japan, first in the 1970s. It was a long time ago. And at that time, I thought it was a Japanese thing. It was a matter of Japanese culture. That's why I went to Japan in the 1970s as a young American. And I found out over years that it's not a Japanese thing at all. It has some roots. It's no coincidence it was born there. But it is a way of thinking and acting that can be done anywhere. Geographically, it's true. In terms of sector, it can work, maybe it began in automobiles, but it can also work even in something as different from automobiles as healthcare. Also in types of work, certainly with discrete manufacturing, putting things together, assembly, but also knowledge work, as we design things, as we think about how we can create new ventures, new companies, new products. It works for that as well. And we know that many companies have tried. Your companies, I think, are undergoing lean transformation. Many fail, and most struggle along the way. So I think a collective challenge we have is to understand this more deeply. As we understand it, then we should be able to be more effective as we try to move forward. So to step back a little more and look at things from a historical standpoint, this is a 100-year timeline, and I believe these slides can be made available to you in a PDF. I don't think you have them yet, but certainly I'm very happy for you to have these. This is a lot of information on it and may be difficult to read, but you can, I'll make it available so you can just spend some time understanding it, thinking about it. But we have about 100 years of what I call the sciences of value creation. Starting about 100 years ago, we began applying science to how a business can work. And the early examples of that, of course, were Frederick Taylor, Taylorism, Henry Ford, others such as Henry Fayol, who thought about how organizations can change, and others along the way. But that began about 100 years ago. That's about the same time that the Toyota enterprise began its journey as well, developing Jidoka, building in quality. So we have about 100 years of the sciences of value creation. We have about 50 years of understanding the innovations that Toyota brought about. So the Toyota production system, the Toyota way, really got its beginnings in about 1950. That's where the company, after the Second World War, began to integrate its business system. They gave us something very different for us all to learn from. It was different from what came before, and it gave us a vision of how things could be so much better. That was a step forward. We have about 50 years of learning about that. Then we have about 25 years of lean. It was 26 years ago that we got the word lean from researchers at MIT, and that's what led to the creation of the Lean Enterprise Institute in Cambridge, where I now work. I've been there now for about 5 years. So when they were studying about the global auto industry, I was actually working in Toyota in Japan, as Sabal said. I didn't know that there was any outside interest in what we were doing at Toyota at the time. When I went to Japan, I didn't know Toyota was special. I was looking for a Japanese answer. By coincidence, I landed at Toyota. But it was 25 years ago that the MIT team was researching the auto industry, visited almost every auto factory, automobile company in the world. They did not go to the Trabant factory. Everything in the Western world, but the things that were behind what was that time called the Iron Curtain, they did not visit. Everything else they visited. And they realized that they had found something very unique, something very special. And they decided to call it lean. Again, at the time, I was in Toyota. Until the books came out, we never heard of lean. But now we have 25 years of thinking about this as a generic thing. So lean is kind of a generic version of Toyota's way of doing things, but now we've learned from this generic study of how it can be applied much more broadly. It's not about one company, Toyota, anymore. In the last 10 years, we've had a lot of adjacent sorts of different applications of this that start to move kind of far from what Toyota did building cars. Yesterday, in one of the pre-summit workshops, there was an exploration of lean startup. So we have about 10 years of how to apply this thinking to entrepreneurial work, to starting new companies. We're going to hear today also about Toyota Kata. We have about 10 years of learning about Toyota Kata, which is a specific way then of learning how to act in this way and how to absorb the thinking. We also have about 10 years of the A3 process, and we have examples of the A3 posters outside that we can all look at throughout the day. And we also have about 10 years of application of lean to healthcare. And we're going to hear about that as well. So the last 10 years have seen a greater even explosion about how to think about these basic ideas in different settings in different industries. But a challenge for us all at the very end of this little chart here, this 100-year timeline, is a question where it says a lean future, question mark. And it has today's date on it, June 23rd, 2016. So what will happen in terms of applying these ideas to making things better in every company, to making the world a better place? We're not making as much progress going as fast as I want to see. I don't know how many years I have left, but I would like to see all of you, as you learn about this, one of the wonderful things about this thinking is that as you learn it, you become enthusiastic. And as you learn it and your learning goes deeper, you develop kind of a sense of responsibility, a sense of obligation. You want to share. So the more we share, the more we can bring these ideas to different places, to different people, different industries, different sectors, in the interest of making the world truly a better place. To go back in time, to kind of the beginning of this, the sciences of value creation, one of the places you can look is where it started. Not just one place, but one place you can look is with Henry Ford and what he did in 1914, which, as the world was learning to motorize, as people were getting automobiles, he realized he had a limitless market. And he realized that if he could make production flow, he could supply the demand that was limitless in the world at that time. So when he began making his product, the Model T, in 1908, it took him about 514 minutes for a job. 1913, he started his experiments in how to make things flow. How can I make work flow? For making cars, for making any kind of work. And he brought that to 2.3 minutes per job, a huge difference. And 750 minutes to assemble the entire vehicle. Then as he learned about the assembly line, how to make work flow, how to make product flow, it became 1.2 minutes per job and 93 minutes to assemble a vehicle. And this truly changed the world. This put the world on wheels. Tremendous innovation just about 100 years ago. Another important point in time, and this is where I was very fortunate, I was very lucky to be there. There wasn't great prediction of the future on my part. I had found that there seemed to be something special in Japan to learn about. And so as a young American who had no connection with Japan whatsoever, I didn't speak a word of Japanese. I had never had a bite of sushi. Now there's sushi bars everywhere in the world. I had never seen sushi before. When I graduated college, I had never spoken to a Japanese person. I'm from the kind of a rural area of the United States. And I went to Japan to learn about this thing that seemed so special. By coincidence, I landed at Toyota at a point in time when they had a crisis, they had a problem. So today I want to talk a little bit about problems and how important and how wonderful problems are. We tend to think of problems as bad things. We'd like to not see them, make them go away. And in fact, we can come up with good solutions when we face a problem that way. But if we can face problems as something that's a delight, we can have even more innovations, we can make even more progress, is an argument that I would like to make. So I landed at Toyota, began to work for them in Japan in 1983. Now, as it turns out, that's at the same time that MIT was starting their study, that 5 years later would lead them to name Toyota's way as lean. But again, no one knew that at the time. At the time, General Motors was looking for some new way to produce cars. They didn't know how to make a small car profitably. They had heard about the wonderful Trabant, but they didn't know how to make one that would work well. Not that the Trabant worked so perfectly. And they didn't know how to make one profitably. This was a huge problem for them. Toyota, for its part, knew that it needed to globalize. So globalization, which started several decades ago, is a huge challenge for all of us, how to work on a global scale. So Toyota had this challenge, and so they made a joint venture with General Motors, which is very interesting. Largest automaker in the world, most successful industrial company in the world for 50 years, General Motors at that time. Toyota, still rising, but the most successful industrial company in Japan, make a joint venture. They both had something they wanted to learn. So the MIT team then, turned out, they were there studying that along with the entire global industry. And here's what they found, and this is in the book, The Machine That Changed the World. They compared a traditional General Motors factory in the US with a Toyota factory, the one I worked in, where they made Corollas, with NUMMI. NUMMI stands for New United Motor Manufacturing, Inc. 50-50 joint venture between Toyota and General Motors. Produced cars together in California. And here's the data that they found. The assembly hours per car. Toyota about half. of what it required GM to make a comparable vehicle, about half. NUMMI, the joint venture in California, almost the same as Toyota. Quality, the assembly defects per car. Toyota about 1/3 of what the General Motors data showed. NUMMI, the joint venture in California, the same as Toyota, just as good. Assembly space per car is one additional measure. Toyota about half of the space that it required General Motors. NUMMI was closer to the General Motors example. And then inventory, which is something, again, that's famous about lean, that inventory gets lower. 2 weeks for the General Motors plant, 2 hours for Toyota. An incredible difference. How did this happen? And at NUMMI, then in the beginning, about 2 days. So this is 1985. MIT is learning about this. We at Toyota were also learning about this because we didn't know if this system would work outside Toyota, Toyota City, Japan. Outside Japan. We didn't know. Now, of course, it's silly. Of course this works anywhere, any industry, any country. We did not know that at the time. This was a huge experiment. No one knew what was going to happen. So one of the things that I've learned that we can all, I think, be aware of, that this word transformation, I'm using again, basically as we think together in our companies, it's an organizational thing. It's also a personal thing. There's a personal transformation that occurs as part of this as well. So that's me, just a couple of years ago. And that's in front of the factory, NUMMI, the joint venture between Toyota and General Motors, the day that it closed down. It built its first car in December 1984, and I was there. It built its last car in April 2010, and I was fortunate enough to be there at that time as well. So the story of what happened there, I think, can be instructive for us as we think about how to transform in any situation. Why is that so? Because, as it turned out, when General Motors and Toyota decided to work and build the cars together, on the Toyota side, where I was, we didn't know, but the factory that we were to use to build cars, to build basically a Corolla for General Motors, was the worst factory in the world. Certified worst. There were various certifying bodies, 2 important ones. One was General Motors. This was a General Motors factory. General Motors at that time, globally, had hundreds of work sites. And this, of all its hundreds of work sites globally, this was the very worst. They did a quality audit every quarter, every 3 months. And for year after year after year, this factory would be at the very bottom of General Motors' global quality. Now, some of you might remember what a General Motors product was like in the 1970s and 80s, but it was very bad. What that means is to be the worst of General Motors' quality at that time was really a feat. To be the worst was not easy. It's almost like they had to try to be the worst. The worst quality in the entire GM system. So that's one certifying body. Now later, MIT also certified that it was the worst. This data that I showed before, right here. MIT looked at it and also certified it as the worst factory anywhere. The other certifying body that we knew of at that time, though, was the union. So General Motors in the United States auto industry, there are unions. They're very strong. And this particular workforce in this factory, and that's the same factory, by the way, okay? There says NUMMI. So here, it's the same factory. It says General Motors there. The first time I went there, the General Motors letters were off the front, but you can still see the shadow behind. There was no NUMMI. And the workforce here was so bad, the union itself, the United Auto Workers, UAW, said, "This is the worst workforce we have ever seen. We can't even talk to these people, much less the General Motors management. They won't even follow our union rules." They would intentionally sabotage quality. Now, the way lean begins is by building in quality, right? You have to, before you can try to eliminate inventory, shorten lead times, you have to build quality in right here. This is absolutely important key. This workforce, not only would they not build in quality, they would intentionally sabotage quality. A little sand in the gas tank as the vehicle is leaving the plant. You take a bottle, a Coca-Cola bottle, and put it inside the door panel. just so it would rattle, intentionally. Intentionally. This factory, you could get in the factory. There were places where management was not allowed to go. There would be doors, there were gambling casinos inside the factory with a lock on the door so management couldn't get in. It's just amazing stories of what happened, and they would intentionally make poor quality, sometimes doing very dangerous things. So the worst workforce in the world, and there they are. The people of the worst factory in the world. In the Western world, I guess I could say. Again, MIT did not visit the Trabant factory. Maybe it was even worse. But this has a date. It shows June 4th, 1984. So this is a photo of the first group of UAW workers to go from California to Toyota City to learn a new way of building cars. And again, decades later, we think, yes, of course, it was better, and so you just do things a better way. At this time, no one knew what would happen. These were all the, here's the amazing thing, all the old troublemakers at this factory, they were all offered their jobs back. The same troublemakers that forced GM to shut down the plant were here. This is the first group of about 30 workers that went to Toyota City. I was there. My job was to help develop a program and to train these people in a new way of working. We just didn't, and we did not know what would happen. We didn't know if it'd be successful or not. This is before, by the way, we had built a single car together. So what's going to happen? These people come to Japan. The worst factory in the world, the people of the worst factory in the world. So what happened? There's a long story that I will jump over. But in 1 year, the headline is, of the long story is, in only 1 year, with the exact same workforce, it went from the worst factory in the world to the best. It didn't just get better in certain ways, from the worst to the best with the same workers. And that is certified. So what you see here is another newspaper article, this one from August 1985. And the certifying body is, it says Solidarity. That's the name of the union newspaper, the union newsletter. The union itself is saying, these horrible workers are saying, that they like the changes at GM Toyota's new venture and want the good feelings to last. So at this time, the quality coming out of this factory in California with this union workforce was 100% just as good as the quality produced in Japan. And again, at the time, everyone was amazed. We didn't know if it was going to work. Incredible results. And the productivity was almost as high as that in Japan. Not as high, but close. And there are a number of reasons for that, from the worst to the best. So the point of this story is that we know from this point in time that this can work. This can work anywhere with any workforce. I knew that at this time. So I expected that it would be very quickly then for General Motors to adopt this globally and for them the world to change as it had done for Henry Ford back in 1914. But we now know a couple of decades later that it's a little more complicated than that. Why is that? So a lean transformation requires learning a new way of thinking and acting, characterized not by implementing a series of steps or solutions, but addressing key questions of purpose, process, and people. So unfortunately, or fortunately, there is no 12-step program that will take you from where things are today to a perfect lean future. And over the years, many have thought that there is such a program. Many consultancies will try to sell a 12-step program. Do this, do this, do this, and you will be lean. As it turns out, that's not quite the way it works. You have to address some very deep questions of purpose, process, and people for the transformation to work. That's what has led us at the Lean Enterprise Institute globally, with Sabolch and others, to think of enterprise transformation, lean transformation on 5 dimensions. Not 4, not 6, but 5. So we think this is good news to recognize that it is indeed possible to make progress. Those questions are, what is the purpose? Why are we here? What are we trying to accomplish? What problem to solve? We want to build these. We want to build the best clicker that the world has ever seen. We want to make a lot of money making this clicker. We want to take 60% market share. What's the purpose? What problem to solve? So we want to think about this word problems. So then from there, how do we do the work? How do we do and improve the work? From there, how do we develop the people so they can do the work to solve the problem? From there, what kind of management system can I have in place? What leadership role
what lead to behaviors to develop the people, to do the work, to solve the problem. And underlying it all, there's some basic thinking. And later today, we'll think together about what that basic thinking is all about. But a question for you, which is more critical? Solutions or questions? Now, we're very busy at work every day, so we sometimes don't have time for questions. We need the solution. What's the answer? But if we don't back up to understanding the question, what we're trying to accomplish, can we truly, faithfully, correctly apply the solution? Which is more critical? So, and what are some critical questions? This is an anthropologist named Claude Lévi-Strauss, who points out something I think is true, which is that the scientific mind does not so much provide the right answers as ask the right questions. You know, the scientific revolution hundreds of years ago was not so much about the inventions and the solutions that came from science. The scientific revolution was about recognizing that, you know what? We humans don't have all the answers. Until that time, we thought we could have all the answers. Science is about recognizing we don't have the answers. That means it's the questions that's important. And I'm going to argue that I think that leads us to think about questions as a way to change and transform our organizations and ourselves. So we have these 5 different questions that we can think of in terms of a house. That's not necessary. And we're going to look at a quick animation about this this afternoon, about how these work. But let's look at a couple of these. Let's briefly go through these questions of the Lean Transformation Framework, Lean Transformation House. The question number 1 is, what's the purpose? Why are we here? What value are we here to create, or what situational problem are we trying to solve? Something that I learned working for Toyota, Japan, many years ago, was to take every situation and try to turn it into a problem that I could solve. How can I think of this as, make a problem statement, turn it into a problem that I could solve, that I could make progress on? So if we think of that as an important prelude, foundation of what a lean transformation can be, we can make more specific questions. Have we made the purpose or the mission, why we're here, clear to everyone? Does everyone know their value create? Does each person in your organization know their specific situational problem to solve? You're hired by a company to solve a certain problem. That's why we have a position at our companies. And then every day, there's different situational problems that come at us. How can we recognize what they are? So what problem are we trying to solve? Or which way is it to true north? So that's where we need to go. How can we all be aligned toward our purpose, the problem we're trying to solve? 20 years ago, we came out with a book called Learning to See, which is the first, one of the first 2 books, I think, that LEI Hungary produced. And in it, there's a famous quote. It says, every product has a value stream, value flowing from beginning to end. Think of Henry Ford. I'd like to add another saying or quote that I think we can keep in mind for the future, which every situation has a problem. Every situation, including right now. The challenge lies in seeing it and finding that problem and understanding it. And if we can do that, we can make steady progress toward a lean transformation. I would make that assertion. I think it's true. But that always then begs another problem, another question, and another question. So one is, okay, if you agree with me that it's all about identifying problems, then we need to agree on, okay, what do we mean by problem? This word problem. So what's a problem? So the most basic way that we think about that from lean thinking standpoint, the most basic way, not the only way, is to think of it as a gap. In fact, the word gap might be a better one to use instead of problem. The word problem in English, anyway, has a lot of, it's kind of loaded. It has a lot of emotion connected with the word problem. But a gap between where we are and where we want to be. So if I can identify that gap, if I can analyze and understand that gap and start closing it, that is making progress from a lean standpoint. So that's the most basic definition, I think, of a problem. And it's fractal. All the way at the top levels of the company, why the company exists, all the way throughout down to what a given worker is doing at a point in time. I'm putting these together. I'm supposed to make one of these every 30 seconds, okay? Oh, I couldn't do it. Something happened and I couldn't do it. It's taking me 35 seconds. Or I have a quality problem. It doesn't fit together right. Or doing this all day, I'm getting some sort of carpal tunnel. Okay? Every moment, people are having problems. So it's fractal from top to bottom. How can we understand and see those and then make the situation better? From a macro standpoint, at the highest level, I think there's someone here from Lego, actually.
I have never visited Lego, but I am kind of a fan of Lego, the company. I just observe it from afar. I read about it on the internet. I buy the product. And Lego, as I understand it, and again, there's someone here who knows better than I, went through a transformation starting about 10 or 12 years ago, which just reading about it, I think is very interesting. And you can find plenty of videos on the internet, on YouTube to watch. But the CEO, who joined about 12 years ago, said that we started with a fundamental question, which is, why does Lego exist? Now, I'm sure when he first said that on day one, the management team looked at themselves and said, oh, gosh. Why, you know, can we talk about how we can improve profitability, improve market share or something? Do we ever get to talk about why Lego exists? The reason I love this in the case of Lego, but it's true in every case. In the case of Lego, you can see this because what Lego did 10 years ago, 15 years ago, and today is basically the same, which is they injection mold little blocks. That hasn't changed at all. And yet, they fundamentally revisited the purpose of the company, and that transformed who they are from what they were doing before to what they're doing today. Wonderful example, I think. And it's even the products. You can get a Lego block that was produced 30 years ago and one that was produced last week, and they'll click together perfectly. It's amazing. That hasn't changed, but the company actually has changed in terms of its understanding of why they're here. And that was the transformation for Lego, as I understand it. So let's back up. Henry Ford. What problem was he trying to solve 100 years ago? He needed to create production flow to answer limitless demand. Limitless demand, so therefore, how can I make production flow? And he came up with the assembly line, interchangeable parts. That was his problem to solve, and he solved it. From that, General Motors looked at the situation and said, well, okay, the problem we want to solve is to provide variety for the motoring public. Henry Ford thought only the Model T is the only product the world will ever need. They can be any color you want as long as it's black. General Motors realized, no, people want variety. People want to have something that says that's fun, that says something about themselves. So they provided variety for the motoring public. Cool. That gave a problem to the auto industry that we have in other industries as well, which is how to produce with flow, but also producing variety. That was a huge dilemma for the auto industry where there's so much complexity with thousands and thousands of parts, but it's also a complexity everywhere we go. If you're making one product number, it's easy to make the production flow. When you're making 2, making 10, shared equipment, now it's not so easy. And actually you don't know what the customer needs and wants at any point in time. So how can we make the production flow like Ford did, but providing variety? So that's one of the big issues that Toyota solved starting back in the 1950s. Create flow while providing variety. But it fractals down, right? It's not just at that big high level of what the company is trying to accomplish at a big level, but each person. So this is a company that produces furniture in Michigan, the United States, called Herman Miller. And there's a team there that's working on an assembly line that produces a high-end chair, and they produce one every 17 seconds, 17-second tech time. And they want to take half a second out. How can I run some experiments, do some science to take 1/2 a second out of my cycle time? And the team is focused on that and trying experiments daily. It's a wonderful thing to see. Focused on the problem that they have to solve. A similar one, sometimes problems come at us that we didn't create. Disruption happens. So in the textile industry, making apparel, Zara, company, again, many of you probably know more about than I do, but they brought a very different business model that's caused tremendous disruption. This is a factory that I visited in Sri Lanka last year, and they're trying to reduce, they need, because of what Zara has done to the industry, reduce their lead time from 48 days, which Nike is very happy with, down to 10 days, because Zara is not happy with 48 days. And so what's happening there, by the way, is there's an andon saying there's a problem in one of the production cells where they're doing sewing. So they were very proud to show me their andons, the lights going on. And I'm unhappy because no one was responding to those andons. They're just going around all day. And there you can see Hey Junko with the product line that they have in the room. So from there, the other questions cascade.
Transformation question number 2, how do we improve the actual work? I feel like until we change the work of a value-creating worker, we haven't done anything. So a lot of companies have very big plans for how to do transformation. Until we've changed, go down to the micro level, it's all meaningless. What's the value-creating work that we do? How do we change that? So have we defined that work? Is it being improved, and by what means? From there, now I can think about how to develop capability. Do we have the necessary capabilities in our company, amongst our workers, amongst people that do any kind of work for us? Have we defined that? What is our approach to building that capability? How do we go about doing that? How do we develop our people? From there, we can think about what management system, leadership behaviors we need to support this new way of working. A lot of consultants, for example, as they think about enterprise transformation, they try to start with the leadership level, and that may be where you begin with some of the work. But until we think about how that's going to fit in with the business we want, it becomes a very vague and theoretical discussion, I find. So now that I know how I want to develop people to do the work that needs to be done to solve a problem, now I can think in a very factual way about the management system that can support that and the leader behaviors that go with it. A quick story outside the auto industry. I don't know how many of you have heard of, I think you've all heard of Alcoa, the aluminum company. And a few years ago, there was a CEO named Paul O'Neill. Quite a remarkable individual. And he led an amazing turnaround at Alcoa. The day he joined Alcoa, it's a big publicly traded company, he gave a presentation on Wall Street. By the way, to the world, I apologize for Wall Street, on behalf of all Americans, for the things that it does to the world. He gave a presentation on Wall Street to the analysts about what he was going to do to change Alcoa. It was a room just like this. Except now I'm Paul O'Neill and you're a group of analysts. And the analysts, you're sitting there with your notepad. Okay, what is Paul O'Neill going to do as a CEO to make Alcoa more valuable, to raise the share price? You know what he said he was going to do? He was going to make Alcoa the safest company in the world. When he said that, all the analysts, ran out of the room to get on the phone to tell their shareholders to sell Alcoa stock. But he personally led the development of the Alcoa business system, which was based directly off the Toyota production system. He decided to pursue growth by improving the work, the speed of the machines, the amount of energy used, the number of people needed per task, the waste of material generated, the length of time that every process would take, and especially safety. He decided to do safety because he said, I intend to go for 0 injuries. Until I said the target was 0, we didn't have a problem. And part of the role of leadership is to create a sense of crisis. He gave everyone a problem to work on. What happened is he understood that we needed to change the work habits of everyone, change the thinking. You can't order people to change, he said. That's not how the brain works. He knew that if I could start disrupting the habits around one thing, it would spread throughout the company. What happened then, to the surprise of those analysts, was that net income grew 5 times, market cap grew $27 billion US, which is huge, and injury rate reduced 50% by 1991 in 3 years. This is in aluminum production, a very dangerous and dirty business. By 2000, it was 5 times safer than it was 10 years earlier. Tremendous change by focusing on creating a sense of problem. What problem do we need to solve? So that leads us to, I think, question number 5. What's the basic thinking, the mindset, or the assumptions that we each take to work all day, every day? And a question that I would throw out to you to think about, and we'll come back to this afternoon, is do you understand the current basic thinking, the mindsets, and grasp its impact on your organization and culture? How do you think about problems? And what are you doing to change that basic thinking and the culture in desired directions? I'll challenge us together to think about that today as we hear the additional presentations, and come back this afternoon and think about this question. We'll dive into it a little bit more, because to do a true lean transformation, organizational and personal, means we have to think about this difficult question of what is our basic thinking. And with that, thank you for your time this morning. And I think I'm going to get off now, right, Samuels? Oh, there are questions.
Hi, John.
Okay.
Well, hopefully there are questions. We have 10 minutes for questions.
We do have 10 minutes.
Please stay on stage. John, while we wait for people in the room, one question that I have. Do you think there's any single industry in the world that the lean process is not applicable to?
Is there any industry in the world that lean does not apply to? I could tell you the most difficult thing. I won't say that it doesn't apply. But before I say it, everyone can think of it. You may have your own answer. In my own case, I began in the auto industry. And I really, only about 15 years ago, I started working in other industries. And one of the first that I worked in was coffee. And I loved working in coffee because it's so different than building a car. Someone comes up, the customer's right there. How can I provide that customer with some great coffee? It's a great problem to solve. And I had so much fun learning about that. And then, 15 years ago, I had a chance to go work and do some work in healthcare. And I spent 1 week working at a healthcare clinic in the US. And I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to work in healthcare. So I brought in my production examples and worked with the team there to design a good future state based upon a good deep look at their current state. And I realized at the end of the week, yes, this can work, even in healthcare. I also realized that healthcare is going to be so difficult that I never wanted to touch it again. It needed to be changed from the inside. But healthcare is one that a lot of people think maybe this would not work. As it turns out, lean probably fits healthcare even better than it does cars. It's a process that works very well with the situational problems that they have. One of the frontiers nowadays is government. That's probably difficult. Right now we're having an election in the United States. And I have many ideas of how we could make that a more lean process.
The election or the campaign?
Yes, perhaps starting with the campaign. But seriously, the thing I think is most difficult, do we have any professors here from universities? Universities I find I think universities would be the last places to change. Why is that? Universities are wonderful places. That's where some very smart people go very, very deep in one thing. And I spent 10 years working at the University of Michigan. I taught industrial engineering. And I found out that the professor working here knows nothing about what the professor over here is doing. They don't care. And if they notice and care, they become quickly very jealous. What lean does, it draws connections. And universities, the way they existed for hundreds of years, they go very deep on one thing without working on connections between different things. So that is a fundamental change at universities I think will take a long time. So I think from what we found, lean will work in anything, but universities is going to take, I think, longer than anywhere else. Add to that the silo, one more thing, which is that in American universities, probably here too, there's a tenure system so that the professors have a job for life. When you put the silo combined with tenure, it creates a situation that's very difficult. So universities will be the last to change. It'll work there too, but not for a very long time. Good question.
We don't have a tenure system here, by the way.
You do?
És megvan az első kérdésünk.
My name is Attila. I'm from Kalapaszt, Hungary. And my question is regarding the CEOs, that what is your experience, that okay, what brings the change to these leaders in mindset? Because we heard about Alcoa, that okay, he said that okay, safety first, and this should be the most safest company in the world, and then that generated the problem. But in general, what is your experience? What brings this this change in the CEO's mindset? Because I think this leader also got some kind of change of mindset before.
Yes. Do you want to say that in, did everyone get the question?
We have translation.
Yeah, translation. Okay, so what about CEOs? That is why I shared the story about Paul O'Neill, to show that not only can a company like that be transformed, but it can be led by a leader. I think we have such a long tradition of expecting leaders to take the role as if they're coming in riding a horse and they're going to tell everyone, here's what we're going to do. Most leaders have a long history of 20 or 30 years experience of being successful in telling people what to do. So it may be more difficult for CEOs to go through the personal change than it is for many of others who are in companies. I think one of the things we need to do is stop looking to the CEO and wish the CEO would change. All anyone can do is change at their level in whatever they're doing in their life. CEOs have a special role. They have more influence than others in the company. But as we leave here today, I think what we all need to do is think of what we can do to change ourselves. So when I get a chance to work with CEOs, it's the same message. I mentioned earlier that it's both an organizational and a personal transformation. It has to begin with ourselves. So what CEOs need to do is first and foremost commit to self-learning, that they will learn this. As they learn this, they realize the next thing they need to do is support and develop others. And once leaders have done that, then their attitudes towards change begins to change. Except that they need to learn first of all, and from having learned themselves, then they help others learn. The same way we began a moment ago by saying, I know as you learn about this, you will develop a sense of obligation, responsibility, and enthusiasm to help others learn. So with CEOs, I think it is no different from that. There are examples out there. There are examples in healthcare. Last week we had a lean healthcare summit in the United States. And what we did is, as we started this effort 10 years ago in healthcare, we found an exemplary leader who had led lean change in their own organization in healthcare. I think the same thing that we all might have to go through individually in terms of changing ourselves, we need to recognize that with CEOs it's probably even more difficult because they have 20 or 30 years of being reinforced that their way of leading by telling what to do is the right thing to do. And for them to make that change, it turns out, is a little more difficult for them than it is even for most of us. But the nature of the change is the same, whether it's a CEO or a mid-level manager or even someone on the front lines. So it's an excellent question, and I think as we think about basic thinking this afternoon, we can think of that one as well. And imagine the situation of Paul O'Neill, the one example I gave. There are good examples of leaders out there, but they have to begin first of all with themselves. If we're all thinking of how my job is to change someone else, then we're always going to be going through a loop that doesn't bring around the change. So the organizational change actually begins with the personal change. Thank you.
Thank you very much, John, and see you again this afternoon.
See you this afternoon. Thank you.